As we often see in Canadian history, World War I has special significance to the formation of identity. In the case of Berlin, Ontario, changing identity was not a simple matter. Berlin, now known as Kitchener, is located in southern Ontario and lies approximately 100 kilometers southwest of Toronto. The land on which it is located was first settled by Europeans in the late 18th century. German Mennonites from Pennsylvania, seeking a place that would allow them to practice their beliefs freely, established the first buildings by around 1800. In 1833, the settlement was designated Berlin as a complement to the German descendancy of the Mennonites. Berlin continued to grow, both as a center of German immigration in Canada and as an agricultural community, through to the end of the 19th century. By the time it was officially designated as a city in 1912, it was also a center of manufacturing and industry with a population of approximately 15,000, 70% of which could claim German descendants. It is then no surprise that it was known as the German capital of Canada. Nonetheless, the town lay in the middle of a very anglophone and fervently imperialist province. For the same reason that the royal household changed their name from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to Windsor, certain elements felt that having a town named after the capital of Germany within Canada was unacceptable while the Empire was at war with that country. Within 3 weeks of the outbreak of war in August 1914, the first sign of anti-German sentiment to manifest itself in Berlin was the removal of a bust of German Kaiser Wilhelm I from its pediment in Victoria Park. After being dumped in the park's lake, several upstanding citizens brought it back up, but decided to store it in the local Concordia Club for safekeeping. The Concordia Club's charter states that it is first and foremost dedicated to the preservation of German language, custom, and traditions, so it was an obvious target for local anti-German sentiment. By 1915, the local 118th Battalion had started recruitment, and at one point the Concordia Club was broken into by members of that battalion while in uniform, and its contents burned in the street. The bust of the Kaiser was never seen after that point, and the location of it remains a popular local mystery to this day. On March 9, 1916, the New York Times published an article concerning 2 Lutheran pastors from Berlin. Both of them had resigned from local churches over controversies concerning their supposed pro-German attitude expressed in their sermons. Specifically, Reverend C. Reinhold Tappert was confronted at his home in the middle of the night by members of the 118th Battalion. After refusing to open his door, it was broken down and he was dragged from his home into the street while being hit and slapped. He was then taken to the local barracks, where he was forced to sing the English national hymn. He had previously received a phone call from a group calling themselves the Berlin Boys, who threatened him with tarring and feathering if he did not leave the town within 40 days. It just so happened that the Reverend Tappert was an American citizen, and he lodged a formal complaint to military officials from the American consulate in Hamilton. He had received a black eye and a head wound requiring several stitches on the night that he was dragged away from his wife and 9 children. He refused to live in Canada after that point. Another clue to the events that were occurring in Berlin in the first years of the war is the diary of Berlin citizen L.J. Breithaupt, which mentions the Concordia Club vandalization and also records that his own home was damaged by soldiers. He had previously publicly attended, as a dissenting voice, an important meeting that was to decide the future of Berlin. On February 11, 1916, a meeting took place in the city's town hall. Recorded in an article from the conservative newspaper The Mail and Empire from Toronto, the meeting was to decide whether to change the name of Berlin to something that was, quote, more in keeping with national sentiment. The name is no longer an honor to Canada, and the city owes it to Canada and the British Empire that no longer should the name of the capital of Germany be tolerated here. The final comment in the article states that the change in name would be, quote, to good purpose if the young men of the city should rally around the colors and fill up the ranks of the 118th Battalion. In the following months, debate raged over the name change. After the quick-to-respond approval and implicit endorsement of the idea by the Ontario legislature, the campaign for a new name surged ahead. The City Council appointed a special committee to come up with a list of names. Many of the 113 suggestions stand out for their bizarreness. Significantly, most of the names refer to one of three distinct categories: names that evoke Canada, names that appeal to the Empire, and names that would help to reverse the bad rap that the city was supposedly getting for making products labeled Made in Berlin. For example, the original Iroquois word Kanata, that was adapted by Jacques Cartier in the 16th century, obviously appealed to Canada. Empire City referenced Canada's place in relation to Great Britain, while a name like Industria strengthened Berlin's status as a producer of goods. The date for the final referendum to choose the name was set for June 1916. And then, fortuitously, while en route to negotiations with the Russians, the former British Secretary of State Horatio Herbert Kitchener, 1st Earl Kitchener, died. The ship he was sailing on, HMS Hampshire, hit a mine off the Orkney Islands on June 5th. As the news spread across the Commonwealth, his name was added at the last minute to the ballot for Berlin's new name. Later that month, the results of the referendum were revealed. Of the population of 15,000, a total of 1,055 turned out, or about 7%. Of these, 163, or 15%, were spoiled. Brock received 335 votes. Kitchener received 346. Thus, Berlin became Kitchener as a result of 11 votes, or about 1% of the submitted ballots, or 0.073% of the total population of the city. Keeping in mind the percentage of women and minors within the 15,000 who could not vote. The new name took effect on September 1st, 1916. After the results were revealed, the local newspaper The News Record, which was the main publication in opposition to the change, noted that, quote, the outstanding feature of the referendum was the absolute indifference displayed by the ratepayers. Not long after the referendum, a petition was organized by citizens to stop the new name, which received 2,000 signatures, twice as many as the votes for the referendum itself. The Legislative Assembly of Ontario either did not think that there were enough signatures, or that changing the name was too politically important to stop. In either case, it was ignored. Historians have variously interpreted these series of events. Many say that it was the town's Board of Trade and City Council that pushed the change through, perhaps over fears of having Berlin's products boycotted. Another reason may be that the Ontario legislature felt it was important for the German name to be dropped. The town was certainly divided over German identity, which sometimes resulted in violent episodes. 70% of the population constituted of German descendants did not solely represent the percentage of the population that did not vote. Under these circumstances, it would seem fair to say that indifferent did not best describe those who decided not to vote. After all, there was little direct action that could be taken to prevent the change. Today, as much as 25% of Kitchener is still descended from German roots. The Kitchener Waterloo Oktoberfest is the largest outside of Germany, attracting 750,000 to 1 million visitors annually. When the town of Kitchener got its new city hall in the 1990s, there was a movement to have the civic square named Berlin Square, indicating that although there may no longer be any hurt feelings after 80 years and multiple generations, Berlin is still remembered.